Over the past week, the Barbados government's coordinated apology tour notched up a gear as a bevy of officials made efforts to quell the uproar over the controversial survey administered to students in the country last week. Education Minister Kay McConney told the public at a press conference on Saturday that the project was not an initiative of local government, but an InterAmerican Development Bank project that was simply being facilitated by the Barbados Ministry of Education. Ministry officials at the press conference also sought to reassure Barbadians that all the responses from the surveys that contained personally identifiable information about minor students whose parents were not notified beforehand were in their care. They mentioned that the 733 students at the 5 schools affected would receive any assistance they deemed necessary. The ministry has since set up a hotline to field parental concerns.
5 schools that the program was implemented in: Princess Margaret, St. George Secondary, Graydon Sealy Secondary, Queen's College, and the Cogen Parish School. Approximately 730 children took part, and we have all of the scripts of all of those students. Exactly 733.
As the weekend progressed, however, authorities' efforts to soothe ruffled feathers were stymied by further revelations about the problematic exercise. On Sunday's edition of local talk show Down to Brass Tacks, Chief Education Officer Dr. Ramona Bradshaw Archer admitted that the same survey with the same questions that were subsequently flagged as problematic and inappropriate had been administered months earlier in June of this year.
What about the matter of whether this test had been conducted at similar schools, similar tests at schools earlier this month or even late last year? What is the ministry's knowledge of such a situation?
Right. So as the information came with regard to the 5 schools affected this academic year, and we began our investigation, it was found that the test that was given in June was of a similar nature to the one that was given in September.
The disclosure means that the number of students affected is more than the 733 that was indicated just a day prior. In her comments on Sunday, Dr. Bradshaw Archer did not provide an updated figure on how many children were subjected to what research ethics professionals have dubbed a major violation of basic ethical tenets when conducting human research, especially in children. New details of exactly how the survey was presented and administered are also emerging that support the argument that authorities have not yet fully disclosed the true extent of the issue. Not only has it been discovered that a first survey was issued, but parents from schools that were not mentioned during Saturday's press briefing have come forward to say that the survey was administered to their children as well. The Springer Memorial Secondary School is one such institution, not listed as one of the affected schools, but one parent told consortium journalists that her now 13-year-old who attends the school was told that she had no choice but to take the survey and was made to identify herself on the instrument while her parents were none the wiser. That parent, who requested anonymity, said that her child was confused by the questions, and the mother asserted that she would not have given permission for her child to participate had she known more about the project. Another parent who called into Down to Brass Tacks last week confirmed that the children were forced to identify themselves on the survey despite the lack of parental consent.
Why was no parental consent sought from parents? Why was there no cover letter attached stating the purpose of the survey and how the information is going to be used? Now, why, if it was a survey, why did my child have to and was told to make sure her name is on this paper?
Dr. Michael Campbell, Deputy Dean of Research and Graduate Studies in the Faculty of Medical Sciences at UWI Cayville campus and the chair of the Research Ethics Committee of the Barbados Ministry of Health, says that generally a study that is evaluating human subjects should have informed consent from the participants, although exemptions are possible.
Studies that do record that kind of information and wish to contact participants in the future need to make sure that that is explicitly clear in all the consent materials. things, and that participants, in this case parents, also give permission. And the other aspect of that kind of research is that it requires more attention to protocols and procedures for data security, particularly when the information is sensitive. So the researchers would need to articulate in a research ethics proposal what their plan is to provide for adequate data security in their both their paper and their electronic data collection.
According to the University of Oxford, informed consent is, quote, one of the founding principles of research ethics. The Ethics Committee of the University of the West Indies describes informed consent as, quote, a decision to participate in research taken by a competent individual who has received all the information necessary to arrive at an informed decision. The UE ethics experts explain that the subject of the research must have understood and considered the information and must decide to participate without being coerced, influenced, or intimidated into doing so. Further, each person involved in the research activity must provide their informed consent, and in the case of those who lack the ability to do so, such as with minor children or adults who are incapacitated in some way, the same process to elicit informed consent must be performed with the individual's legally authorized representative, a parent or legal guardian. While to some this state of affairs might seem to be a clear-cut and major violation of research ethics standards, Barbados' Data Protection Commissioner says she needs time to figure out whether the way the information was collected from the children in question represents a breach of the country's Data Protection Act, passed in 2019. Section 7 of the Act, which deals with consent, speaks about how the data controller must be able to demonstrate that consent was given prior to the processing of data. Section 8 states explicitly that, quote, the processing of a child's personal data shall be lawful only where and to the extent that consent is given and authorized by the parent or guardian of that child. Notwithstanding, a spokesperson for the commissioner indicated to local press outlet Barbados Today that the Office of Data Protection was still, quote, looking into the matter to determine if any laws have been breached. Meanwhile, although the IDB has apologized more than once and offered further clarification on the purpose of the project, questions about the seeming violation of basic ethics rules remain. Social development specialist with the IDB, Sabine Riebel-Oberg, was quoted in local press outlets as saying that the questions were to, quote, provide a realistic view of the child to give a more holistic approach to evaluate programs. However, according to Dr. Campbell, a study with those stated objectives involving minors that is not anonymous should generally be subject to review and approval from the local ethics board before being administered. On the website of the UWI at Cave Hill Ethics Committee, under the heading Exemptions from Review, it states that research involving minors is not exempted from review, and further states that in order to be exempt from review, quote, private data, field notes, and published materials are so encoded that there is no likelihood that the identity of the human subjects will be revealed. Not the case in this study, in which the children were made to write their names and attach it to the instrument. The document goes on to state that, quote, surveys and interviews of minors, children, are not exempted, and that, quote, researchers conducting research in the Caribbean must therefore take into consideration the legal age of consent of children in the various islands and territories of the Caribbean, end quote. Campbell notes that foreign researchers have on occasion avoided coming before the Ethics Committee in the past, instead approaching local subjects directly without approval, but says that this kind of behavior is thankfully rare. Campbell argued that ensuring that human research is reviewed by the local ethics board is of immense value and says skipping this vital step can lead to unintended negative consequences.
The issue you raise about researchers from outside Barbados disrupting local research is an important one. So research from outside Barbados, even if it's well-intentioned, that doesn't receive local ethical review can run into unanticipated negative outcomes that would not necessarily have been picked up by researchers who don't live and work in Barbados. And our committee not only has a wide range of academics from different disciplines, but we include community members outside of the academic or research community to advise us on the implications of research that even the academics might not pick up on a first read. And for that matter, if we're aware that a project impacts particular communities or marginalized populations or some area that we don't understand, we have the opportunity to co-opt feedback from members of the community if we have any questions. And so we do our best to make sure that we cover nuances that might not be apparent at first glance. And a further issue is that outside researchers who don't connect with our local research community run the risk of disrupting local research efforts that may be ongoing or planned to start. And in general, making connections with local researchers as well as local ethics review improves the quality of research coming from outside Barbados. I mean, there are a number of contextual factors in Barbados that are important to understand, both from the perspective of formulating appropriate research questions, but also issues around feasibility and anticipated or unanticipated outcomes of research activities. So the point here is that there's nothing wrong with collaborating with researchers from outside Barbados, but the collaboration is key.
However, it is currently unclear whether high-ranking officials are even aware of the existence of the Local Ethics Committee. Prime Minister Mia Mottley recently weighed in on the issue, saying that such a committee would have to be established by the Ministry of Education, quote, to make sure that those things that you go into schools to talk to or survey with respect to children pass a minimum threshold test, which is exactly the kind of work already being done by the Ethics Committee at the UWI. That committee, Campbell says, has a long-standing arrangement with the government of Barbados to provide oversight on projects and initiatives involving human research in the Ministry of Health and other government departments. Further, Campbell noted that the local ethics board is easily accessible with a regional and international presence.
It's important to make the point here that the Research Ethics Committee is not a secret and we're not hard to find. So in addition to being present on the UWI site, we are listed with the U.S. Office of Human Research Protections, which is part of Health and Human Services. So we're included on their website. Researchers from North America can easily find information for us there. And we're also a member of the Caribbean Network of Research Ethics Committees, which also has a strong web presence and is organized under CARFA. So even just a couple of minutes of Googling should be enough for researchers to find out that we exist.
As discussed earlier, the Code Caribbean project, to which this survey is associated, is not just a Barbados initiative. Following the public outcry over the method of administration in Barbados, the Ministry of Education in Belize released a statement admitting that the same data collection instrument had been conducted in at least 5 schools in that country. Students at those 5 schools, said the ministry statement, completed the full survey, while an undisclosed number of other students at other schools took a survey which had the controversial questions removed. In a bid to preemptively address concerns among Belizean parents, the statement said that, quote, the practice of seeking parental consent will continue to be observed. Unfortunately, the statement omitted key details that may have helped to give the assurance it sought to provide. In response to questions from consortium journalists, Ministry Communications and Public Relations Officer Kevin Chen was unable to provide answers about whether informed consent was obtained from the participants and or their parents, about whether the students were told that the survey was mandatory, or whether the minor children were forced to include their names or other information that could tie their identities to the data collected. We continue to investigate and will report further as new information reveals itself.